Robin, Kirsty. Okay, so welcome to the channel. My name's Stanley Ben, and today's video is going to be a marksman tutorial. Now, I want to highlight that this video isn't just for armor using the Ace mod. What I'm trying to achieve in this video is a better understanding of the role and weapons and the fundamentals that will hopefully allow you to take away and apply in a variety of games that utilise DMRs or medium to long range weapons, as essentially the fundamentals, they're the same. Now this is a video that I've wanted to create for a long time now, as I was a long range rifleman in the Marines and I do love shooting even today, and I finally had a bit of downtime due to COVID-19 and time off work to actually sort of put something out there on YouTube. So I hope you'll enjoy it, and please let me know what you think down in the comments. Okay, so what is a marksman? A marksman to me is a skilled shooter, but also someone who has proved himself proficient in applying the marksmanship principles. Now you can Google marksmanship principles if you're keen as mustard, right? So yeah, they operate as part of the section or squad if you're a Yank, and their primary role is to extend the range of the section's firepower. Okay, so they're attached to the infantry at all times, meaning that they will be banging on doors, right? They will be clearing compounds. They don't operate alone, right? They don't go off and lone wolf it. Like, they're not snipers. I can't stress this enough, right? Marksmen aren't snipers. There's a significant difference between the two, right? But marksmen can be given an individual fire control order by their sort of seniors or like corporals, whoever's in charge, right? To take out HVTs. Now, HVT is like technicals, machine gunners, RPG blokes, blokes planting IEDs, right? Other marksmen, snipers, if like lads are pinned down. So yeah, they're HVTs. Now, snipers are predominantly, well, they're information gatherers and reconnaissance experts that utilise sort of stealth and concealment, as well as being sort of long range precision shooters, and they usually work in pairs or alone, and they also do cool shit like calling their support and artillery or whatnot. Now the sort of playground of ops for a marksman is going to be around the sort of 300 to 800 meters plus mark, alright, depending on how good the shooter is and what weapon system he's carrying. With this in mind, he could extend that range up to 1000 meters onwards, okay, depending obviously how good he is. Now, as you can see, this far exceeds the bog standard rifleman's range of around 300 meters. So that's what you're doing. You're just extending that sort of range of the section's firepower. Right. So how I'm going to split this video up is into sections covering certain topics, and I'm just going to talk about them individually and try and demonstrate them using Armour 3 as a backdrop. Okay. Right, Kirsty. Right. So let's go. Okay. So the first thing I'm going to talk about then is the makeup of a round. Now, a lot of people think that the whole entire round hits the target. Okay, this isn't necessarily true. The only part of the bullet that hits the target is the top part that goes down into the neck slightly. Okay, the way that I describe this though is to think of it as a sort of like a rocket ship, like the Apollo 13. Alright, so if you look on the internal part, you can see that at the bottom the primer. So the primer would be like the engine. All the propellant inside is just the rocket fuel, okay, and the actual top part of the bullet is the sort of lunar module that will come apart from the rocket itself. Okay, so what happens then inside the weapon system is that a firing pin will hit the primer, which causes an explosion, which is the engine exploding, okay, igniting, sorry. That ignites the fuel, okay, so all the fuel burns, and what happens is it causes an explosion at the top, and the actual bullet goes flying down the barrel, okay, and spins down the barrel. So that's what happens inside the weapon system itself. So yeah, this is the bullet. Obviously there's different calibers and we'll talk about them later, but yeah, just to give you a bit of insight of the makeup of a round. Alright. Okay, so what we're going to talk about now is sort of ballistics, okay, so internal ballistics and external ballistics. I'm just going to try and simplify this, alright. So what actually happens inside the weapon system? When you pull the trigger, right, you release a spring that releases the hammer, okay. So the hammer will hit a firing pin. The firing pin will hit the percussion cap of the bullet, alright, of the round. This will cause an explosion which ignites the propellant inside. Okay, now that explodes, and causes the bullet to fly down the barrel. As the bullet travels down the barrel, it spins, okay, because there's like swivel rifling inside the barrel itself, right, which is makes the bullet more aerodynamic. If you think of an American football flying through the air, it spins, doesn't it? Well, the same principle with a bullet, okay? It's more aerodynamic to spin, and then you get like spin drift and stuff like that. So that's what happens inside a weapon system. That's the internal ballistics. Now, the external ballistics is the sort of bullet trajectories, okay? And as you can see from the sort of picture on the left, you got things like line of sight, sight alignment, point of aim, point of impact, okay? Now, you don't really get sight alignment in games, okay? Because what sight alignment is the correct alignment of your rear sight and your foresight, okay? So, or if you've got a scoping system itself, just making sure that the scoping is obviously like facing the right direction. But yeah, so that is sight alignment. Now, line of sight is you aiming down that weapon system at something, okay? So it comes into like point of aim as well. So lining your weapon system at a target, and then you get point of impact. So what you're looking at and where the round lands, okay? So you'll have your point of aim and you'll have your point of impact, okay? Now the actual trajectories of bullets, okay? We'll talk about gravity later on, but if I'm looking straight at a target and I don't at like say 100 meters, as soon as the round exits the barrel, it will start to drop because of gravity. Now to manipulate that bullet drop, all we do is just tilt the weapon system up, so you change the elevation, so you can like it's like throwing a javelin, okay? So you're just changing the angle of trajectory. So that's the sort of external ballistic side of it. Now most rifles are like sort of battle 0 to 300 meters. So when the round leaves the barrel at shooting at 300 meters, at a 100-meter point, the bullet is still rising, okay? So this is why the Marines, they used to teach us to aim at the bottom of the target at 100 meters, because the round is still flying high. It'll actually go above your line of sight. So you can see there the black line is my line of sight, and then the red line is my bullet trajectory, okay? So at 100 meters, the round is still flying high. Now at 200 meters, they used to say to us, aim at their knees, because the bullet is still kind of flying high, okay? The trajectory bullet flight path is still kind of high, and then past 200 meters you have a culminating point, okay, which is the highest that the round will travel, and then it will start to come down, like being pulled down by gravity, and it'll actually like hit the target or be close to like at 300 meters, okay? That's your point of impact, okay? So that's the sort of basic sketch of ballistics, all right? Okay, so the next sort of topic on our list is calibers. Right, now there's a variety of different calibers out there. And when I say calibers, all I'm talking about is just different size bullets, alright, or different size rounds, and they all perform differently, right? One thing I will say is that a bigger bullet doesn't necessarily mean it will travel further or be more accurate at distance, but usually it will hit harder due to having more energy, faster muzzle velocity, and the heavier bullets are less susceptible to wind deflection, alright? The longest confirmed sniper kill was with a TAC 50 cal round, right? But most sort of accurate calibers today are like longer, thinner bullets, like your sort of 300 Win mags, or at the minute the 300 normal mag, which is starting to dominate. And they're like 7.8 millimeter rounds, okay, which is slightly larger than the 7.62 NATO round. Obviously, like you also had the 338 Lapua Magnum, which was an 8.6 millimeter round. This used to dominate, but obviously these longer, thinner rounds are starting to become more accurate. Now, when choosing a caliber or a weapon system, to me it would depend on what I'll be doing. If I'm getting amongst it with the lads and expect to be clearing compounds, then I'll be taking like a Mark 12 sort of SPR or an M16, alright, something that's a 5.56. If I'm out on the ground with like clear line of sight, then I'll take a 7.62 weapon with me with sort of like 20-inch barrel, like an L129 or SR25 or an M110, right? Just basically something longer. And if I know I'm going to be engaging at longer ranges, then I'll be grabbing like an ESR with a 300 Win mag, right? So that is sort of calibers, and the best thing to do is actually get on the range and just play around with each one of these weapon systems and see how they perform differently at ranges in wind, alright? And you'll see different bullet trajectories, right? You'll see faster impacts, alright? And you can actually see the sort of how muzzle velocity affects these rounds. So it's actually good to actually like get good practice out on the ranges with different calibers, alright? Right, so now we're going to get into sort of meat of the video. So this is factors affecting a round, alright? Now there are additional factors that can affect a round, especially past a lot of 1,000 meters, like proper long range shooting, such as like muzzle velocities, spin drifts, Coriolis effect, right? Air temperatures, pressures, humidities, and I'm not going to talk about that, right? I just want to try and simplify things as much as possible, as talking about that kind of stuff is bordering on the sort of sniper art, and there's like plenty of content out there on YouTube for that. All I want to do is I want to like make this video as sort of easy to follow as possible, because with the marksman's role you don't really get enough time to sort of implement this sort of stuff. You want to be sort of combat efficient as possible, and a lot of it is just rough estimates, because you've got like semi-automatic capability the majority of the time. You don't have to rely on like one shot one kill. You can actually put a couple of rounds down and apply the sort of misfire drill, which was like where you're missing the target, you can bring it on quickly. So what I'm talking about with the factors affecting a round, all I'm going to cover is sort of gravity, range and wind, okay? Okay, so the main thing that affects your round is gravity, right? Now, gravity is constant, okay? That's why we walk around, okay? Because gravity's pulling us down all the time. The same thing applies to a bullet, right? So as soon as a bullet leaves the barrel, gravity starts pulling it towards the earth, right? When a bullet exits the barrel, it's immediately met with air resistance as well, called drag, or wind resistance. But gravity produces natural bullet drop, okay? And we need to compensate for this using a bullet drop compensator. Right, so what is a bullet drop compensator? Right, so a bullet drop compensator is the sort of turret drum on top of a scoping system that manipulates the mil radians, right? So yeah, it allows you to manipulate the angle of elevation, which thus changes the trajectory of the round, okay? So it'll either be mil radians, as we just said, or adjustable iron sights. Basically anything that enables you to adjust the bullet drop of your weapon system, okay? So that's gravity. Gravity being the main constant that affects your round, alright? Right, so the second thing is range, okay? So the range to target. Now, range to target, it can be constant if it's a static target, but 9 times out of 10 it'll be a sort of variable, a variable moving target. Now, with range, there's 2 different ranges, alright? Now, this is important, especially in shooting, is you get the sort of direct range, okay? Now, the direct range is you actually looking at that target, so your complete line of sight, that's your direct range. And then you get the actual range, which is the horizontal range or map distance range, okay? This is the range that you need to zero your weapon to hit that target. Now, elevation comes into this, as well as like cosine, and we'll sort of talk about that later. But basically, if you're higher than your target, then the distance will always be different, so you'll need to adjust for the actual range. Okay, so let's say you're 1,000 meters up, you're looking at a target that's 800 meters out. The actual range of that could be between 600 and 700 meters. Okay, so but that's like because you're 1,000 meters up. Okay, because there'll be 2 different trajectory patterns. If you zero your weapon for that direct range, I guarantee you're going to like miss high. Right, so there's 2 ranges that you need to consider: the direct range and the actual range, and you should be zeroing for the actual range. Okay, I talked about cosine earlier, but the cosine effect is sort of the angle that you change. I'll actually link a video below explaining all this if you're mega keen. Alright. Okay, so how do we find the range of the target? Now, we find the range of the target by, well, there's a variety of methods, and the easiest being a rangefinder. So if you've got access to a rangefinder, this will be your sort of best aid to sort of judging distance or finding the range to that target. Some rangefinders have got built-in sort of elevation, so it'll actually give you the actual range. It will account for your elevation to that target, to actually what you're looking at, which is great. But if you don't have access to a rangefinder, then you've got to go into sort of judging different distance methods. Alright, so there's a few sort of methods. First one sort of being like the appearance method. Now the appearance method is best done on a range, because what you're doing is you're looking at different ranges. No, you're looking at targets at different ranges, so you know what a target looks like at 100 meters, 200 meters, 300 meters, all the way up to about 600 meters, and you can see the sort of detail of the target will sort of diminish as the range expands or whatever, or continues onwards. So at 100 meters you should be able to see full details, okay, complete outlines of the body, all equipment, all weapon systems. Now as you get to like 400 meters you won't be able to see as much, and obviously like 600 to 800 meters it's just going to be a blur. You're just going to like basically see the outline. So that's a sort of appearance method. So the amount of detail that you can see, obviously the closer the target is. So the only way to get better at that is practice. The other one is the unit of measure. Now what a unit of measure is taking a sort of object that you know quite well. So let's say like a football pitch. Everyone sort of knows the sort of range of a football pitch is about 100 meters. So you can use that as a unit of measure. So if I sort of imagine two football pitches, like I'm looking at that target, can I fit two football pitches in between us? Yeah. So he's around 200 meters. Okay, these are all going to be sort of rough estimates, but they're just sort of aids to judging distance. So if I know that a house is 100 meters away, right, I know it's 100 meters away. If I sort of like double that and then double it again, it's like 400 meters away. That target looks about 4 houses away. Yeah, so that's a unit of measure. You're just using something as a unit to measure to that target, right? And then also you've got like bracketing. If you've got a sort of good section commander, he will give you reference points, right? It'll be like, right, that lighthouse over there is 500 meters, and if you've got a target in between you and that lighthouse, you can sort of use bracketing. So if I know that that lighthouse is 500 meters away, I've got a bush which is about 100 meters away, so I can rough estimate the distance in between. So that target looks about 400 meters away, 350 let's say. Yeah, so that's bracketing. So that's another aid to sort of judging distance. Also you've got maps, access to maps. So in Armour, like you've got access to maps, and I can just shift and click, right, and it'll give me the range. But I actually like to sort of know sort of where the area is operating, the enemy's operating in. Always know my location, and just count the grid squares. Okay, so 1 2 3 4 5 6 7. Okay, that target's around 700 meters, between 6 and 700 meters. Okay, so if you've got access to a map, it can be great at judging distance. Okay, a great aid to judging distance. Also you've got in scoping systems themselves, I'll talk about this in the reticles, but in some scoping systems you have like stadia rangefinders, especially in the Dragonov. You'll have like a rangefinder and a Dragonov, and what you're doing with them is you actually put the target, you paint the target into the actual parabolic curve, and that'll give you sort of rough estimation to range the target. They're actually great additions to scoping systems, to be honest, and they are quite accurate. So yeah, but we'll talk about them later on. Okay, so the other sort of method you can use to acquire the range is the mil-dot ranging formula. Now you can only use this with sort of mil-dot sights. To be honest, it doesn't have to be a mil-dot sight. You can use the sort of PR1 mil sights that have got like ticks or hash marks, alright? But yeah, the actual mil-dot range formula itself. Now I don't use this often, but it's great to practice with, right? And I don't use it if a target is smaller than 2 mils high, because the sort of ranges jump dramatically, okay, as the target gets smaller. But it's great for sort of getting a target rough estimate range under sort of 1,000 meters. Right, so what the formula is then is the target height divided by the number of mils, okay, the height in number of mils, times 1,000 equals the range in meters, right? So what we'll do then was go through a few sort of practices. So first of all you need the target height. Now you need a unit of measure for this. Now I use 1.8 because 1.8 simulates a target who is 5'9" tall, right? 1.7 is a target who's 5'5", and 1.9 is a target who's 6'2". Alright, so I use 1.8 because I think the average man is around 5'9". It's just tall. Alright, so that's what I use. I'll sort of go through a few of them, just so you can sort of see the sort of ranges that we get. Right, so the target's height then, so it will always be 1.8 in this sort of demonstration, and divided by the number of mils. So this is the target's height in number of mils. So what I do is I paint a target, I get a line of sight on the target, and you can see there that he is 2 mils high in my target, in my line of sight. Right, so it's 1.8 divided by the number of mils, so 2 mils. Yeah, so for this one then it's 1.8 divided by 2 equals 0.9. okay, so I times that by 1,000 and that gives me 900 meters. I don't even need to times it by 1,000 because whatever the decimal point is, so let's say it's 1.2, 0.65, that's the meters. So 6.5 will be 650 meters, 1.2 will be 1,200 meters. All right, so that's what I use. So 1.8 divided by 2 equals 0.9, 900 meters. Right, these won't be entirely accurate. Right, they're just rough. So what I suggest is that you get on a range, practice this, and then get a rangefinder out and actually get the specific range and just see how close they are, because it can be a good aid. Right, now if I used a different unit of measure for the target's height, if I use, let's say 1.7, so if I've done the same distance then, so if I use 1.7 divided by 2, right, divided by 2 equals 0.85, so that's 850 meters compared to 900 meters using 1.8. Now if I use 1.9, so 1.9 divided by 2 equals 0.95, okay, 950 meters. So you can see there, regardless of what sort of unit of measure I use, 1.7, 8 or 9, I'm around 50 meters. Okay, so like that's maybe like half a mil. So they are sort of rough ranges, but I use 1.8 at all times. Okay, so that is the mil.ranging formula, and it's really easy to use. Alright, so I highly suggest you just go ahead and practice this on a range, designate targets to like actually clarify the actual range. Alright, right, so the third sort of factor that can affect a round is wind. Right, now wind is variable and it can deflect a bullet's flight path if it's not compensated for, so we do need to compensate for it. Right, how I sort of explain this to civilians is, if I've got a ping pong ball and I'm aiming at something and I go to throw it, if there's a wind from right to left, it's going to push that ping pong ball to the left, okay, because it's disrupting that ping pong ball's flight path. The same principle happens with a bullet in flight. If it's obviously the further the range and exposure to the wind, the more it's going to deflect that bullet's flight path and trajectory. Right, so that's how I sort of explain it. Now, because wind always changes, we never sort of dial in wind deflection adjustments anymore. It's best to just hold for wind because it changes all the time. Now this is sort of where Horus and Tremor reticles come into their own, because they've got refined wind hold adjustment points. So I mean, we'll talk about them later on in reticles, but yeah, so to sort of judge for wind, to measure wind, you need a kestrel or some sort of equipment or device that can measure the wind speed. Okay, there are sort of methods to sort of get a judgment of wind speed or wind strength. You can look at flags, yeah, you can look at tops of trees, paper debris flying about will give you an indicator how strong the wind is, and you can also get sort of mirage wave patterns in the scope system itself, but I've not found a game that sort of implements that, to be honest. But yeah, they're just a couple of methods that can help you. Now there are a variety of sort of wind formulas out there, but they don't really work that often in armour. I mean, I've tried a few out. I mean, the one I use in real life is Todd Odnett's sort of wind call formula, but it doesn't work in armour, to be honest. I mean, it works in real life. I mean, I use it all the time, but the ace sort of dope cards that they use in armour, they have like a 4 miles per hour sort of wind as a units measure for all calibers. Yeah. This isn't necessarily true because each caliber differs as it's deflected by wind. Okay, so we sort of changed the formula to rectify that. But I mean, the actual unit measure that they use in armour on the range cards, it does work and it's pretty easy to use. I mean, I'll show you later on in the video sort of how I adjust for wind, and it is a sort of fast, smooth process. I adjust for the range first, and then I'll have like a wind call, like a holding wind call. But what I will say is that adjusting for wind with the addition of a moving target, right, now that's where the fun begins, because not only like leading the target with like a 1 mil hold, but I'm also adjusting for wind as well, so it could be 2 mils, 3 mil hold, right? And then if you change your direction, then that's going to be changing again, because I won't have to adjust for wind, right? Just to lead. So where I'm holding 3 mils if he's moving from right to left, and I've got to hold 2 mils if he's moving from left to right. Okay, so yeah, it can all be like fun and games, but it's all about practice. So make sure you get out there and about. But also I want to talk about with wind is wind value. Now I'll put up a little picture there. What I'll say about wind value is, regardless of the wind direction, just carry out the wind formula for 100% wind value. So as if you've got a wind from left to right, and then half it. Okay, if you've got like a headwind or a rear wind, then you obviously don't really need to compensate, but you might for like a 1/2 mil hold left or right, depending on the distance. Okay, wind can have an effect if it's front or rear facing at longer distances, so be aware of that. But if you've got like an oblique angled wind, then just half it, alright, and then test and adjust. So you might not get a one hit kill, alright, just use the misfire drill that I'll explain later, and then yeah, just test and adjust. You should get on your second target, on your second shot, sorry. Alright, Kushti. Right, so the next sort of topic we're going to talk about is elevation and angled shooting. Now this can be a bit of a head scratcher to teach, so I'll link a video below which could better describe this for you. But earlier on we talked about two different ranges. Okay, we've got direct range, which is the direct line of sight range, which is you looking through the binos, looking through the sight, looking through the rangefinder right at the target. And then you've got the actual range, which is the topographical sort of landmass range, right? And if you're not zeroing for the actual range, then you'll miss your target, and if you're higher than a target, you'll splash high, because even though gravity is continually pulling down on the round, it isn't dropping as much as you think it is at an angle. So how do we find the actual range? Now if you look at this picture, I'll put up now, if you're the fire in the top left, you can see like Z would represent the direct range and Y is the actual range. Now if I pulled the Z direct range up horizontally, it would be longer than the target, and if I'm zeroing for that, I'm going to miss my target, right? So how do we find the actual range? Now we do this by using cosine and using an angle cosine indicator or an inclinometer. I'll put a little picture up there so you can see. Now these will be attached to most sort of DMRs and sniper rifles, because the bubble actually is to alleviate cant in the weapon system, which can throw a round off also. But the inclinometer itself gives you the angle to target, alright? We've actually got it in armour, and I'll show you there. If you just like Control Shift K, you can change it to the inclinometer, alright? So this gives you to the angle to the target. I'll give you the cosine numbers, alright? And then once we do the formula, it'll give you the actual range, which will actually be smaller. So I'll put the cosine numbers up there, alright? So feel free to pause the video and write them down. So the formula used is the direct distance, right, times the cosine, equals the actual range, and you will zero your weapon to this actual range. So an example then, if I've got a target that's 400 meters away with a 20-degree angle, cosine angle, then it'll be 400 times 0.94 representing a 20-degree cosine angle, which will equal 376 meters. So there you go. So I'll be off 24 meters. Okay, now that's enough to miss the target. So it does matter with elevation, okay, depending on how high you are, and you need to sort of like practice this to see how much you can, or how much this will affect your round. I play around with this all the time, because at certain elevations and ranges it will differ massively. So, but to find your elevation, you can use like a sort of dagger, a mini dagger. You can use your map. I check my map all the time and check the contours to actually see how high I am, and then finding my target's location on the map, I count his contours, his contour lines, to see how high he is, okay, which will sort of tell me the difference and how much I might need to adjust without even doing cosine, you know. So basically the golden sort of rule is, if you are higher than your target, then reduce your mils and aim lower, and if you're lower than your target, then increase mils, aim higher, right? Usually your targets going to be past 20 degrees, so I hardly utilize this formula on the fly. I just account for it and drop either 0.5 mil or 1 mil if I need to. So play around with this if you wish, alright? But yeah, that's elevation, and that's the cosine and angle shooting, okay?